Safety Committee, August 8th, 2023. Call the meeting to order. Do we have an acceptance of the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Approved. Next, a motion to approve the minutes from the June 13th Public Safety meeting.
Second.
Minutes are approved. No
There's the
citizen
minutes, please.
comments. Do I have a motion to discuss the
Chief pushes the
resolution
updates.
2023-33?
Yeah, they're in
So
there.
moved.
Yeah. What's her name? Caitlin.
Mayor Claire, are you gonna go over that or,
I'm gonna hand it over to Jesse.
okay?
I'm smarter when he talks. So this is really us for funding for grant application purposes, being a part of the hazard mitigation plan that Sumner County puts together, and they put it together with the city of Hendersonville and other agencies. So absent us adopting a plan, there's some grants that we can't readily apply for. So this gives us a broader application for grants. And that's basically what it is. It is an update. It happens every 5 years. So other agencies within Sumner County have already adopted it, and some are on the docket to adopt it. But it's an update of an existing plan that we already have, so that we're continuing to be eligible for grants.
And I read there's no cost to the city or anything.
Correct.
I just wanted to check in and see. I was disappointed to see that we had so many red dots on page 75, which is 60 something in the plan, but 75 in our folder. And then a few pages later, it listed there were some things that we could do if we decided to fund that in a separate ordinance. And I was wondering if we did some or all of those things, would that move us to have more yellow or even some green on here? And the red indicates, because people might be watching us, the red is specific areas that our city is at higher risk. And then yellow and green is good. And it seems like we're, well, not the worst, but we're certainly not the best prepared.
Yeah, and so that's the table specific toward two tornadoes, correct?
It is, which, is a pretty big concern.
Yeah, I can follow up with Ken and the team. Ken kind of spearheaded this, Ken Widener, Sumner County.
Mm-hmm.
So I can follow up with them and see if there's specific things we can do. I know there's actual mitigation measures that are outlined in here for the city of Hendersonville. And we actually are looking into doing another one proactively that's not in here too, that we're still investigating.
Okay.
That can be, I think could be
Is it a secret?
No, I just want to make sure it's viable before we announce it, and we are looking into it.
Okay. The property acquisition seemed like, that's on page 8. That seemed like the most expensive one at $300,000, but of course, I'm assuming we could prioritize the property that we would acquire. But the other things were like 15 or 20,000. Sorry, read. Battery backups, generators for vulnerable people and buildings that are crucial. And then, there was one more.
And so we've actually gotten some funding through FEMA for properties that we've acquired when they flooded. So Safely Court had some properties that flooded, and we went in and purchased those with FEMA dollars, and then took the homes down that were in flood zones.
Yeah. So that's what I was wondering, like you wait until the next flood and then you use FEMA dollars to do that. We don't actually.
We have a list too of some recurring properties, and I don't think that there's the high severe properties, I think in the last round of floods, we've taken all those properties off the table. But Sarah has a list of some of those properties.
The generators and the battery backups were ones that I would like for us to look into funding. And maybe that's something we could discuss at the mid-year, because I don't know how, well, it's not urgent until we have an event that makes it urgent. And if we did, we could fund it at that time, I guess. Is that true?
Yeah, we're actually actively looking at generators right now as well
Okay.
too. So
To find out. And the battery backup things. Oh, the other one was, I don't even know what it means. The mast for the traffic lights.
yeah, so our traffic lights are held up by wires,
Oh,
and so an actual metal pole, so a mast arm, like a metal mast,
yeah,
and then a mast arm is where the signal heads.
yeah. Okay.
They're
That seems like something we should do.
yes, ma'am. They're more expensive than wires, and that's why we
And
installed.
did it say $20,000 is what our estimated cost would be?
Well, it depends. If the intersection is like on a wood pole, and it's got wires, then it's going to be more expensive. I think a typical intersection, if you're going to go new, is going to be around $250,000.
Okay.
You know, if you're going to replace, like if you have dated equipment, you're going to go in there and replace it. A lot of times you just go ahead and replace everything. So all the new projects that we do, we require them to be on a mast and a mast arm. So we don't allow the wire spans anymore. But on some older areas of town, they're still on those wires.
Well, I would like to see us kind of like how we over time gradually get more LPR cameras to switch those out for the safety of our community. Okay. I guess my only other question was to ask HPD and HFD if there's anything in this plan that you feel you would need additional resources, training, or otherwise to meet. If there's anything in here that you questioned or wanted us to be aware of.
I think communications wise, I think police and fire both could benefit from that. Currently, we have the ECC, right, that all the cities contribute to, with our city being the biggest contributor. But let's take like a Christmas bombing, right, where the service went down. We have no secondary circuit to use for dispatching. And so I think I spoke with the mayor and Jesse, or maybe it was just one of you. Even in our ISO rating, we're leaving some points on the table for not having a secondary circuit to be able to use for dispatching. So like right now, everything comes online through Comcast, right? So if Comcast goes down, then it rolls to AT&T. And that is not the ISO folks do not consider that a secondary circuit.
What would be considered?
So a secondary circuit, like the city of Gallatin maintains some of their old radio communication equipment, it would need to be like a standalone.
Oh, I see.
And they could simply have it at the ECC, right? Not necessarily have to be at PD. I know PD kept some old equipment, if I'm not mistaken, but I think it was only for the ability for police to be able to communicate with themselves.
Can fire communicate on that as well, or no?
It's different frequencies. So we maintain, when we switched to the ECC, we already own the equipment. We had it in place, and we felt like it would be beneficial because we own it and the towers were still up to continue to maintain that equipment and keep it in place. I would believe that the ECC still has the ability to communicate with us on that frequency. We can do, but so if they completely went down, we get out the word to everybody to switch to the HPD legacy frequencies. And we have those in our portables and in our main units. So we still have full police communications. And then look, if the ECC was completely out, Hendersonville Police Department is designated as a backup site for the ECC. So we have a full dispatch center. They would send personnel from the ECC to HPD and reopen the communication center. If for some reason the current radio system was still down, they have the capability to at least talk to police and dispatch. They can, I don't know that they could talk to you all on the new frequencies, but
Could
obviously.
we add that on our old equipment so that in the event of an emergency that it's down, the fire and police could use that or no?
It would require a change to the radios, but we could possibly allocate a frequency to HFD. But so our new radios, the way they're designed, it requires what's called a key for each radio. And so we maintain the key, the Moto Turbo key for our radios so that frequency would be in there. The radios that and I'm sure y'all's are identical, they can accept 2 keys. Some of the other radios we looked at could only accept 1, which would be the frequency that we're on now, the system we're on now. We chose these radios because we could get the separate key. So that's how we maintained our legacy frequencies. I'm not going to say that's not possible to obtain the key, but they are not cheap. It could be done with the current radio equipment. It's just not inexpensive. Sometimes those keys are very, very, they're not when you initially buy the radios, when you go back to get them.
Portables alone are about $2,000 a piece.
Yeah.
And that's the small ones that they have. Steve's got with him right now. Those are $2,000 right now a piece
For the key.
for the radio itself.
Oh,
And so that might be a reasonable thing. We might just have to reach out to Comtech, who is like the folks that we did the countywide communication program with, to see if that would be a cheaper cost for us to have that as a secondary circuit. As I said, the Christmas bombing, when it happened, everything was supposed to roll to Wilson County. But since it went like crashed everything, right, that Comcast was on, our calls didn't roll to Wilson County. And it's supposed to roll to Knoxville. And obviously when that all went down, it was like several states that were involved in that.
They told us that FirstNet had redundancy. We found out very quickly they do not.
Yeah, we had to call and ask for a cow. We had one coming for us to be able to communicate with each other because we didn't know how long that was going to last. And you physically have to go in and enter that in a document and email that. And we were doing that on Christmas Day, to make sure that we had communications. We were going to set it up in the park and have security around it because it's a big deal and you need a wide open area. And it was really only going to pick up within a certain amount of range on Main Street. It wasn't going to go deep in the peninsula. It wasn't going to go deep in New Shackle Island area. It was only really going to receive here. And so it was going to be problematic. And so I think a secondary circuit would be vital for public safety in my mind.
I'd like to see a plan for that. I don't know, and with dollar figures attached to it. I don't know if that's reasonable for our next public safety committee meeting or if you would need more time, but.
We're supposed
I'd like to put numbers to it and.
We're supposed to talk to Comtech tomorrow because we have some portables we have some questions about that we have. So we could simply ask him if he would start that process to look at it to see. I'm sure he's familiar with y'all stuff at the PD chief.
Mm-hmm.
So he ought to be able to, maybe spend a day up there looking at it and maybe come back and say, hey, it'll cost you X and you have an extra key on your radio. And so it'll save you some money, but it will cost you this amount to reprogram every one of those radios to be able to pick up that secondary circuit. But we can start that process, and that's a month, right, before our next meeting. Yeah, we ought to be able to have some kind of general idea, I would think. I can start that tomorrow.
That'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Hopefully give you a backup.
What about you, Chief Jones? Did you see anything?
No, and Chief Bush has already mentioned communications, and that's one of the things we kind of planned on. Just in general, maintaining our legacy system for that purpose. That's supposed to be an F5 hardened facility, but you just don't know. So, supposedly FirstNet has made a lot of changes after that incident, lessons learned. So I think until the next big issue, how the reality of what they've actually done, we won't know. Because initially that was the whole big thing behind FirstNet and the federal funding is that they have redundant systems and they won't go down.
It didn't work.
You're correct, it did not work.
So you have a trust issue now.
Well, we supplied, the city and PD put out message boards that this is the number you need to call if you want to get the ECC. And it was actually cell phones that we supplied them so that people across the county could actually call into the ECC because they had no landline service. So
I think having a few mobile generators on hand would be a good idea. We do have some folks in town that their kids depend on life support, and we've collected some of those locations because if a tornado comes through, winter hits, we lose power, we try to focus on those folks to make sure that their families have what they need as far as power. Like our heavy rescue has a 20K generator built into it, but that requires us to take that piece of equipment and dedicate it to that location, and then they can run cords and stuff off that, right, to sustain
Life support.
right for that particular child. But it's committed to that one scene. I know the last storm in December, we borrowed some from EMA and took to 674 East Main because they lost power, right, and they were going to be without power for a while. So we dropped off a couple of generators up there. So I think having a cache of a few extra mobile generators would be a good idea for us as a city. Of course, obviously, that takes money.
Well, that was on the list to have generators, and I assumed it meant that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've got them at stations, and I think they have them at PD as well. And I know we've got one here at City Hall. But if they're actually trying to say, what are you doing to help the community? That would be really the only way we could do that, would be to have a few mobile.
Grants out
We
to
can
get-
look. I don't know
get
the answer to that.
generators for these households.
I mean, we
for
can
the-
look and see if it's on AFG, like, right, if it's a possibility, but usually they list stuff as a high priority, low, or medium. We can certainly look. I mean, it's not a problem to at least dig into it.
For the people on machines that are, we had a huge emergency.
Right.
NES isn't the quickest at times.
Yeah, I think we've got a sheriff's deputy in town that their son is
Yeah.
on life support, and we stay in contact with him on a regular basis when some kind of event comes through to make sure they got what they need.
And then places like, I can't remember the name, but the towers.
Christian Manor,
Yes.
Hickory Bay on Saunders Ferry.
I'm assuming they have generators.
Those are all
Assume
older
that.
buildings, so I don't know if it was a requirement at that time. I would think newer buildings now would be required to have them. I do not know the answer to that.
That's why I love Christian Towers.
Hickory Bay does not.
I didn't think so.
Christian Manor, I don't know if they do. or
I don't-
not,
I
because
don't
that's
ever remember
supposed to
seeing them
be
over there.
Assisted living
Mhm.
and it's not a care facility as
Right.
much as assisted
And
living.
it's, yeah.
So I don't think they have any. I'm like you, I don't think I've ever seen any over there.
Yeah, and some would argue that that's not our role as government, especially with Christian Towers. But our role as a society is to take care of our elderly. So, I don't know. But I'd like to know if they have a generator or not.
Any more questions? Do I have a motion to move this to phone?
I so moved. Second.
Motion approved. Other agenda items, fireworks. Is that for you?
It is. We used to have a prohibition on private fireworks. Anybody who did fireworks really above a bottle rocket, they had to come and get a permit from the city. I think you guys initialed it. I think police initialed it. At the end of the day, I was the one who signed it. That's for shooting them off. We had two companies that also had fireworks stands that have been grandfathered. It's actually illegal to sell fireworks in the city. You can't get a permit to sell fireworks in the city anymore. We had two that have been grandfathered, I think, from like 1973. One let that lapse, so now we still have one that can sell fireworks here. It's a piece of land that is zoned for that, and so it's not necessarily the property owner that holds that permit. It's the property that's zoned for that. We just have one left. So when we had a prohibition of shooting fireworks, and we had one or two people selling fireworks, it didn't work real well in the message we got to residents that they bought fireworks in Hendersonville and they shot fireworks in Hendersonville. And it's very hard to enforce that. So what the board did 3 or 4 years ago was they opened up a window around July 4th and another window around New Year's, where people could legally shoot fireworks. They didn't have to come to City Hall to get a permit or anything like that. And they could shoot them off in that window a couple days before, a couple days, maybe one day after, a couple days before, maybe one day after. I can't remember the specifics of it, that they could legally shoot off fireworks. There are time constraints on there. I think it was 10 p.m. I think was the.
I think, I believe it's closer to 11.
Is it? Okay.
I think the day of, I think New Year's Eve is till 11,
Okay.
but the 2 days prior is like 10 o'clock.
10
You have to cut it off at 10.
And you understand a problem right there. New Year's Eve until 11. Not many people are going to go buy fireworks, shoot them off before 11, and then go to bed. That just doesn't happen. I received a couple phone calls last year before July 4th, received a couple phone calls around New Year's this year, several phone calls at July 4th. And I'm just entertaining how you all feel like that the city should regulate those, and what do you think that we should do? We can come up with all sorts of scenarios and things to do, but at the end of the day, it's important to have these guys at the table, because it's got to be something that is enforceable, and it's got to be something I think that is also reasonable, but at the same time, it's got to be something that's safe.
I'm directing this to you because, I mean, I think it's un-American not to let people shoot them, but from a safety standpoint, I'd like to know what you think is reasonable. I mean, I had a guy tell me he had a huge mortar that, landed up next to his house.
So the big thing with us is what the weather's been like prior to and during, right? If you're in the middle of a dry spell,
No.
then we ban them all, except for a commercial like Freedom Festival. And then we put a plan in place, right? We go saturate the ground around where they're shooting them. We make sure the distance is allowable, right? You get into a subdivision, there is no limitations, right? Your neighbor's shooting you off. You may not be shooting them off, but inevitably it's landing in your yard close to your house. And that's what creates all the angst from the folks. And then you got folks trying to go to bed at 9 o'clock, right? And then you got folks that shoot them till, 11, 12 o'clock. I know, working hand in hand 36 years with these folks, they just get inundated with it, right? And then they show up and nobody's shooting them, but the smoke's in the air, right? So somebody's been shooting them. I don't know what's a reasonable time frame. I do agree with the fact that it is it's about as American as you can get, other than apple pie and Chevrolet. But I do think that's a fair thing to do. But I don't know what the time limit really looks like, right? I don't know what I think would be comfortable to say that. I think that would need to come from y'all. We could certainly ban it every day, all day when it's dry, super dry. But other than that, I think you guys would have to come up with the times. I don't think that's probably best for me.
You're okay with implementing ban or no ban?
Well, 100%. When we do it when it's dry season now, about any kind of burning of
Yeah.
pits or anything like that. 2 years ago, Freedom Festival, we met, 3 or 4 days and made plans to make sure the ground was saturated. We dumped copious amounts of water over there to make sure that the potential for fire was very, very low. We just can't do that in everybody's neighborhood.
A constituent this year, he's heard from people every year leading up to July 4th. He suggested that fireworks over a certain size be limited. I don't know enough about fireworks to know. I don't know anything about them, how
So-
they're measured or.
I know a little bit about it, but I can tell you from an enforcement perspective, that's almost impossible to enforce or determine, or because the calls are coming after they've shot them off.
Yeah.
So you really don't know. And I mean, the way we tried to handle it was, if they're not shooting the cars or people's houses, especially if it's after the hours, we can put a stop to it. But even then, there's so many, you're over here talking to this people and 8 more are going off in the distance. It's very difficult. And, you can overwhelm a whole shift very quickly with that. So if it wasn't something that was an actual danger to people, it's just almost impossible for us to
Yeah.
really take any action or do anything.
The professional folks, we require them to have a distance of 1.5 times the highest discharged firework. So if it's 600 feet, then it's got to be 900 feet of clearance all the way around. Because that's 1.5 times.
Of course, you can't do that with residents.
Right.
I'd like to see us just put out safety tips around that time of year.
We do try to put something out, but we certainly could do that as a cooperative thing. Again, that's the decision, whatever y'all want to make done to do. One of the things I was going to talk to you about, there's a guy that wanted to reach out and get his pyrotechnic certification and felt like that he could have the ability to shoot them in his neighborhood. And we absolutely told him he could not do that. He's not going to be able to shoot a 600-foot firework in his backyard with houses as close as they were. We just was not going to do that. So there might be some way that we could do some kind of legislation, you folks, to say that these are only allowable in residential areas. I don't know. That's a suggestion that we had when we were talking with this guy about requiring a certain distance, but
Can you
it's hard
purchase
to enforce it.
those that are 600 feet?
You have to have a pyrotechnic license.
So we can't run into,
That won't be it.
that won't be a residential.
Right, but
I mean-
he was wanting to buy, he was going to go through the class, get his certification, and then he was going to bring home the 600-foot one and shoot in his backyard. And we said, absolutely not. We won't allow that to happen.
Mayor Clary, you need more work. So I was thinking that you could work with the HOAs to maybe ask them to designate an area in their neighborhood where it was safer. Like I'm thinking of my neighborhood currently, those could change, like in the pool parking lot area would be probably a good place.
So-
I don't know that that's
In some
up to
common
you
areas.
to-
Well, I meet with
Well,
the
if you
HOA
were-
presidents
if you
usually.
spoke with them about asking them to put it on their agenda for discussion. I know a couple of HOAs banned them in the neighborhoods.
And I will say there's some folks in subdivisions that will flat out tell you it's their right and there's nothing you can do about it.
So, let's say if you put, 2 days before and the 4th of July and then you're done. But
It's
it's
a-
still not gonna be,
It's a little bit more time than that right now, isn't it?
whatever the time frame
But it
is.
was
But
also the 5th.
I can look.
I
Just
think
give
it's
me,
2 days before Monday.
The first through the third, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Fourth, 10 to 11.
So,
Hey,
did y'all hear this?
he's got the times for it.
It's the July the 1st through the 3rd, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. July 4th, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. December 31st, 10 a.m. through January 1st at 1 a.m.
Oh, okay.
So 1 o'clock.
And that's the only time at New Year's. Just that,
December
okay.
31st.
So to answer your question, I meet with the HOA presidents usually about every 2 years just to get them together, and more than anything else, they just appreciate meeting each other. But there's a couple issues that apply to all of them, so that's something that I could talk about. I don't know whether they listen to me a whole heck of a lot, but maybe that's something to say, hey, why don't you invite your whole subdivision to bring them to the parking lot of your pool instead of 4, 6, 7 backyards? I can try.
I think I'm happy with the dates that are,
Okay.
unless anyone else has any.
What was the time around the 4th of July?
10 to 11, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m.
It's the 1st through the 4th, right? The 1st through the 3rd is 10 to 10.
Yep.
And then the 4th is 10 to 11.
And people do shoot them off in the middle of the day and don't understand it. I'm like, you just wasted
Anticipation.
$100.
You can't wait.
That's right,
They
they
can't
can't
wait.
stand it.
It's like a new kid at Christmas.
Any other-
I might still come forward with an ordinance
That's fine.
that y'all might disagree with.
Well, I mean, I'm open to any suggestions.
So I'm the opposite. I'd rather ban them all 100% from individuals.
Oh, I disagree.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, make a
However,
case for it.
However, fireworks and bottle rockets, that's 365 days a year in my book. You should do those. But I might come forward after listening to some folks, and we could find something from there, or we'd end up doing nothing. So
I may meet you in the middle. But,
Okay.
I mean, I think gotta have that American spirit, you know?
I'm not un-American because of
I
that.
I think the first through the third, we can pull it back a little bit though. That's 10 o'clock,
10 to 10.
10 to 10. People working the next one. I think 10 o'clock is kind of late.
Doesn't get dark until.
I mean, if you really want to compromise, if you're gonna do it, in my opinion, would be you let them shoot them on the 4th from 10 to 11 and then New Year's Eve and be done with it. But that's my suggestion. I'm not by any means.
That'd be a lot less
I'm okay-
stress for my
I'm okay
dog.
with- I mean, I'm fine with that. I just don't think you should ban them all together.
I'm okay with that, or the day before, the 3rd and the 4th.
I like the
and then
3rd
New
and
Year's
4th.
Eve.
How does your staff deal with that?
So, again, if it's not a safety issue, we try to give warnings and tell them, we're not, this is it, this is your one warning. Past that, they will issue, and if it's a safety issue, they'll issue citations on that. But a lot of times, it's kind of like Chief Bush mentioned, you get the call, they get there because they're leaving another call, and they get there and there's smoke hanging in the air and not a soul to be seen. So you're not really, because a lot of times you'll see on the cul-de-sacs, they'll get together and that's where, or I know in my neighborhood, and not as much anymore because some of them have grown older and moved on, but a lot of them would get together, 4 or 5 neighbors and just in the middle of the street, and they would actually shoot them off in the street. And I thought, boy, this is gonna be a mess. And then I noticed the next morning they had big trash bags sitting beside their driveway where they had actually picked everything up. So I thought, I mean, and I just mentioned to Alderman Collins that we have some folks in our neighborhood that are a little too old to be out shooting fireworks, but they do make a point to pull their lawn chairs out there and watch everybody else shoot them. So, it's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that you with your lawn chair?
No.
She
Sitting
did not say that to you.
Front porch and watch them. So.
Did I speak correctly that bottle rockets below that we do not regulate?
Well, I mean, it's still, we consider it fireworks. So, if we have people shooting them, we'll take care of it.
Then
But,
I
I mean,
take back what I said about 365 days.
those are not as bad as, like you said, the tall mortars and the windows shake. And so there's that.
Okay, any more discussion on that?
So thank you.
HFD strategic plan.
So I passed out some copies to you folks and I'll provide copies to the board on the 22nd. So basically this is part of our accreditation process that we've been working on almost close to a year, a little over a year now. And so in that, it's just giving us an opportunity, right, to do some self-reflection, right? So we know what we do inside of our own realm of our circle, but we don't really know what folks in the community think of us, right? I mean, we know that they care about us. We know at 9/11, 4th of July, Christmas, things like that, they bring us all kinds of things. So we know we're respected here. That's not the question, but we want to know where we have some weaknesses, right? And living in our own realm of things, we may not see those weaknesses, right? And so this strategic plan was 2-phase, right? We held a community stakeholder meeting where we invited folks in the community to come and provide us with some information, other city departments, other local fire departments, EMS, HCA was involved, some of our retirement communities, some of our pastors groups were involved in that as well. I think Mr. Eckenroth was part of that. And then we created an agency stakeholder. So page 2 shows you the list of folks that were community stakeholders that come in and gave us their input, which is in the appendix A that we'll get to. And then we had the internal stakeholders, right, that took the information that was provided from the community stakeholders to say, hey, all right, we've identified these as potential areas of strengths and weaknesses. And so what are we going to do to try to overcome or keep on improving those? Next page is just a mugshot of me with some information about what we're doing. Basically talks about the 6-step process, priorities, gaps, mission, values, goals, objectives, and then action to try to resolve all that. And again, we just talk about our community, the introduction part, the process. As you read through this, I mean, we feel like it's good reading material because it explains a little more about who we are and what we're trying to do and the message we're trying to get to folks in the community. It talks about some of the findings from the community stakeholders, and it talks about some of the stakeholder work on page 2. Then it talks about our history. Next year is going to be our 50th year, 2024. So we actually started in 1974. So hopefully we'll get something together for that at Freedom Festival. Next is just our organizational chart, and then just a picture of the folks that were internal folks that participated in it. And then we just redefined our mission, values, and goals, which is all included in here. I don't want to sit here and bore you to death by reading it verbatim. You can read it. And we took information from the community stakeholders and internal to redesign ours. And it may not be very much changed from the original one, but it is, again, involving people from internal and external that gives us some ideas about what we should do. And so in doing this, we're also looking at changing the way that we respond to certain calls. I know, we talk about how costly apparatus are. We know how costly maintenance on these apparatus are, and fuel's not cheap. And so right now, currently, let's say we have a fire alarm at Lowe's, we send 3 engines and 2 trucks, which is a normal response for us, right? 96% of the time, because we're now extracting that data. When we go to Lowe's or Walmart or Home Depot on one of those alarms, it's nothing to it. And so we're looking at it saying, why are we taking these risks, right? Running 5 pieces of equipment plus a supervisor down the road, emergency traffic. You all know that traffic's heavily involved in Hendersonville anymore. So we're wanting to decrease the opportunity to have an accident, but we're also still wanting to provide a certain level of protection to the people. So we're looking at changing our protocols for that, right? We're only going to send a primary engine and a primary truck. Now, if dispatch gets more information, or the first company officer gets there and there's a water gong going off, or there's smoke showing, then all they have to do is ask for the cavalry to come, and they're right down the road, right? They're 4 minutes within reach of everything. And we just feel like that's better for us, better for the city. It's going to reduce some of the wear and tear on apparatus. It'll reduce the opportunities for accidents to occur. We're even looking at doing that on residential fire alarms, right? That we'll send the primary engine first. We even do that on 911 hangups, right? If we get a 911 hangup, I know they send somebody, but if it's a 911 and they don't have a proper code, this day and age, you never know if somebody's been taken hostage, and that's the way that they were trying to send a message. So we send folks just to do a public service check, right? Make sure everything's cool at the house. There's no issues. So we're looking at ways to redesign how we respond to things. Also keeping in mind that safety is our most important focus. So we're not going to sacrifice your safety, right? But there's no sense in us running the data showing that 96% of the time, those big box stores, it's just a false alarm. And so why are we doing that, right? Why are we taking those chances? Again, you get into some of the findings. If you look at it, there's 1 through 18 listed. And basically what you'll see is they want us to be qualified, knowledgeable on what we attempt to do, well-trained, trained staff available to respond to incidents, highest quality training. So it's 51 was the score that was given by all of those external community stakeholders. They had a grading scale, and you correct me, you were part of that. I stepped out of it. I just did introductions because I didn't want folks to think I was trying to influence it one way or the other. So I did that with the internal stakeholders as well. I didn't stick around. I let them speak freely, let them say what they felt about us. And so they rated our qualified training is the highest priority. They want to maintain what we have as far as staff and how we train them. Again, next at 44 was respond to emergencies and fight fires timely. Respond quickly to fire, health, accident, emergencies, which we do, and we're getting better with that by building Station 7 in the north side of town. Again, I don't want to sit here and read through all 18 of those, but it is some information that these first page on page 9, that's from the folks in the community of what they expect from us as a fire department. And I guess to kind of sum that up in a nutshell, that would, if they saw some maybe gaps in that, that might be where they would maybe reach out to you folks to say, hey, what's going on? Or maybe reach out to me and say, hey, I've seen some unqualified things happening, whatever it may be. But I think it gives them an opportunity to say what they don't like about us. And then it gives us opportunities. So let's look at a low priority. So look at number 11. I'll just grab that one. Staff an adequate number of well-trained, competent, and highly proficient firefighters' ability to maintain adequate staffing. And of course, that gets into recruitment, retention, that gets into pay, that gets into benefits, that gets into who pays for retirements versus who doesn't pay for retirement. I mean, we're doing some stuff now along the lines of that, but that's things that folks in the community want, right? And that's who we're here all to serve, is the people in the community. Flipping the page, going to 10, you'll see areas of community concern about us. And this is stuff that's verbatim from those folks, right? Staff retention, they're worried about keeping staff, right? I mean, we all are. Police is in the same realm of keeping people qualified. What you don't want to do is start training people up and lose them to other agencies because they're paying more money, right? I mean, I understand there's limitations that you can do with pay, but we've got to be competitive or we will lose folks. I mean, Metro just gave the biggest pay increase to public safety in the history of Nashville. And so they're going to 4-man and women minimum staffing on each piece of equipment in Nashville. And so over time, we've not lost people to Nashville, knock on wood, over the last 8 years. But with this happening, there's potential because of the way they pay. And I understand we can't compete with Nashville. I get that. I'm not asking that, but we need to find somewhere in the middle of the road to do that, because your community wants us to do that, right? That's not coming from us. That's coming from people in the community. And this is stuff they want. Funding, economic downturn leading to less funding for personnel and equipment. I mean, we all are experiencing that in public safety. I mean, cutting money here, cutting money there, getting by the skin of our teeth. Ability to respond to community growth. I mean, again, that's building stations, right? Equipment in relation to infrastructure. I mean, we talk about that all the time. Vacancies and wage pressures, number 5, not enough firefighters. I mean, again, that's all stuff that people in the community want. Then you get over to the positive community comments about the department. I mean, again, it's verbatim. I'm not going to sit here and read through those. Y'all can do that. Approachable staff, excellent relationship with surrounding agencies, lots of public events, quality department with highly trained personnel. Again, I'm not going to sit here and read all that. You folks can do that and then ask questions on the backside of it if you have any. You get into the fireboat, having the ability to assist in the water is a great asset. Folks really love the boat. Other community comments, you know, again, HFD, thanks for all you do. More partnership opportunities, right? They're wanting us to build more relationships with folks, and we're certainly okay with trying to do that. More community visibility. I'm not sure how we can do that, but we certainly are looking at ways to improve that, right? I'm not saying that they're wrong. We are always trying to evaluate how we can be more accessible in the public eye. I think that's good for everybody. Things they feel like we shouldn't change. Again, you'll get into that's verbatim from community stakeholders. And then our programs, basically, you're looking at the programs that they felt like, again, that were most important, which again is fire suppression. Then you get into your emergency medical service, which is about 85% of what we do is medical calls. And then when you get into internal stakeholders, when they start talking about it, they start talking about, you know, requiring folks to have that medical training, right? EMT, paramedic, possibility of going to ALS engine companies, things like that to provide a higher level of service to the people in the community. We have more qualified paramedics that can do first line cardiac drugs, can read monitors, so we don't have to wait for an ambulance to get there to do that. Sometimes we have to do that, right? And so that's kind of internal stuff that some of our folks have talked about, and that's on the next 2 pages, actually the next 3 or 4 pages. Again, I don't want to take up your time. I know Chief Jones has got something on the agenda. I'll certainly take any questions now and or when you read through it and you have some questions, because I'm sure at the board level, I'll probably do this same explanation when you do your report.
One question, only one, I promise. On page 10, the areas of community concern, this was from the community and not your staff, or a combination of both?
Nope, it's from the stakeholders only, outside, external stakeholders.
Okay.
And again, that's the folks that we all serve, right? Y'all, us. Mm-hmm. This is what they deem as necessary things.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments? This is nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
And there's more to come. I mean, we'll have a different, like a plan of what we're going to do, how we're changing our protocols. That's another thing that we're working on right now that'll be published and come out, and we'll talk about that when that comes. And again, that's all part of us trying to reach for accreditation.
All right, next up, HPD Toledo tuition grant.
Okay, so is interesting the way this one came about. Normally, we come to y'all and let you know we're applying for a grant, especially if there's any matching funds required. This actually started out, they approached us and said, if you're interested in applying for Toledo funding, fill out this interest form. We did, and we were waiting to hear back from them on the grant application process and what was involved in that. What we got back was a notification that basically said, congratulations, you've been selected by the state for funding over the next 5 years to send officers to basic Toledo classes. What we thought that was going to be was in-service classes hosted by Toledo as well as basic recruit class. We found out it is just the basic recruit class. But the way a lot of our grants work, I'm sure y'all are familiar, is we have to pay for it. We send the paperwork in, they reimburse the city. So the way this one works, which is really great for us and for the city, when we send a recruit to the academy, they fill out the paperwork and they send us basically the paperwork and the invoice. We sign both, send it back to them. They say, okay, thanks. They send it in to the grant funding source, which is the state of Tennessee. And this is part of the funds that came from the violent crimes grant. It's all in that large pool of money. It is separate, but it's in that large pool of money that the state set aside for law enforcement. And so the Toledo will actually send that paperwork in. They receive the tuition back. So we don't pay it out and then get it back. We just have to sign off saying, yes, we sent this officer to the basic recruit school. And over the next 5 years, we can send up to 8 officers a year and it will be fully funded. So I think the cap they put on it, the current Toledo tuition for a basic recruit class is $3,300, but they put a cap on it of $200,000. So that basically works out to $5,000 per officer per year for them to do that. We heard, and this was really interesting, we contacted the grant people. They said, well, yeah, we're not sure. So we did some more research on this, and they actually indicated they are looking at, when we send the invoice into them, not only will their tuition be paid, but they will send the cost of the tuition back to the agency. They're calling it cost sharing. We were told that just this afternoon at like 4 o'clock, because several people we called initially were like, yeah, we're not sure, but we've heard that. So the latest word we've got is, yes, that's how it's supposed to work. I think they may still be trying to nail that down. But if that happens, what will occur is, for every officer that we send, they will not only cover their tuition, but send us the cost of the tuition back to the city. So if that is 100% factual, that's an excellent boon for us, because what we can then do is use that money to send current officers to other training in schools. That we're always looking for reasonable or low cost in-service or additional training schools. But some of those schools, depending on the technical aspect of it, can get fairly expensive fairly quickly. So that could, for us, it was a win that the tuition was covered over the next 5 years to up to 8 officers a year. So the idea that we may actually get the tuition money back in addition to it being covered that's outstanding.
So you don't need our approval for this grant. This is not the type of grant that has to go before the board.
I would not see that. What I do anticipate, if we determine, so this will not start till January 1, 2024. So our current recruits that are fixing to go through, we know we won't get any money back from them. However, Toledo's already said, we'll take care of their tuition. Don't worry about it. So that's good. But the other side of it, if that occurs, we probably will need to come back and do what I will probably ask Mr. Ray to do is an ordinance to accept the funds and appropriate those for expenditure by the police department, because what we have been, on the front end have been told is if they're gonna do that, that money has to be designated for a law enforcement expenditure. And I heavily foresee that it is gonna have to go toward law enforcement training. It's not like we can just spend it on something else. Right, or, well, I mean, even something else in law enforcement,
Not
like
even like
buying,
vehicles.
right, vehicles, fuel, uniforms. It's possible they would approve that for initial uniform issue to brand new officers. So the governor's plan is to increase department's ability to attract and help them in gaining more officers. So we don't know yet. I strongly suspect though, because it's all for training, they'll say, yes, we're gonna send you this money back, and it has to be for law enforcement, but it has to go into the training program somehow. So it could be either training equipment for our officers or for other funding for them to go to training. If y'all hadn't noticed, we just put up a 6 foot and a 4 foot wall at the police department, and that's the reason we did that, is so that we can do our own in-house applicant testing whenever we need to, because we've run into an issue with trying to schedule. And so with our current training sergeant and corporal, if somebody shows up and even here from out of town that says, well, I'm gonna be in town this day and I filled out my application, we can test them and do a physical agility test right there that day and say, we'll be back in touch with you as soon as we get your background completed. So it's hopefully gonna help us streamline the hiring process also. Any of y'all want to come try the 6 foot and 4 foot wall?
Sure.
Feel free.
Any other questions?
No.
Any other business?
Congratulations.
Thank you. We're actually surprised. We were expecting to have to go through a lengthy grant application, and we got notified that, hey, you were selected. And we said, wait a minute, we didn't fill out the paperwork. Oh, no, that was it. You did it.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I have one thing, as I would like for us to, on our next agenda, to revisit the issue of out of city
Yeah.
calls.
Yes, so like I told
Just
you,
for our next
I
agenda.
think,
spoke with you about that.
yeah, I think we had a conversation about it since the last time that we met and we started having that conversation about it. We've not had one call outside the city. So it's kind of amazing, right?
Maybe we just need to do
When you-
that every few months.
When you start talking about it, it kind of stops. Doesn't mean that they're doing
It's a
any better, right? We just
it's a
don't know.
coincidence, right?
Could be.
Well, I just think we need a written agreement as to automatic aid or mutual aid and to get it
To the
defined.
schools.
We need
We
to-
wanted
We need
automatic-
to get it all
We
sorted
wanted
out.
ECC to automatically dispatch you to the school.
So I do know that, looks like Shackle Island's fixing to go under some management change. I do know that. I've seen something on Facebook about that, if you believe Facebook, but I do believe that to be true because I've heard that on the street as well. And so my intent would be to try to meet up with that, whoever that individual is that's going to take his place, to see if he and I can reach an agreement about the school situation.
Even beyond that, I just think that relationships go better when you define them. And so we should define our relationship with the fire departments that are on our borders where we would be answering calls or potentially answering calls. Including number one, those are the only two,
Mhm.
and Shackle Island. So just, I think then if we have it in writing, this is how we're going to work together. Nobody can be disappointed because they know what the expectations are.
I don't disagree.
I think it'll help our relationship.
I mean, from a law enforcement standpoint, the biggest problem with volunteer folks responding to active shooters at a school is it's not knocking them, right? Because I have the utmost respect for somebody who volunteers their time to give back to their community. But if they show up, they're not going to have an identifying, right? They may have a pair of blue jeans on and a T-shirt. And to a law enforcement officer, they're gonna have to clear them, right? If they come across them in the hallway, they're gonna have to stop them in their tracks because they don't know who they are, right? They don't have any engagement with those
They might get
folks.
shot.
Well, the possibility's there, right? I mean, again, let's just say that there's a volunteer firefighter's got the right to carry. That's another problem that law enforcement would have, right? That they show up on a scene like that in blue jeans,
With a gun.
a non-identifying shirt, it just says Shackle Island Volunteer or Hendersonville Fire, right? You know us, we're going to be in uniform and then we're going to be in our vest. They may not. And so that just slows down law enforcement when they're trying to go in and do what they need to do, which again slows down the overall operation of that.
Which is an issue Chief Jones brought up also, so.
And
because you
the,
would be among the responders for sure. Police departments have it all worked out. If there's a shooter, everybody goes.
like I tell you, when they had that false alarm at the hospital 8 months ago, they were coming out of the woodwork, county, state, drug interdiction. I mean, they were all there. So I can only imagine if it happens and it's a real deal, it's probably going to be 10 times worse as far as people responding to it.
We can work on that for the next one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can certainly, if it stays the way it is right now, it'll just be zero. Because we've not gone outside the city once since we talked about it in our last meeting.
We'll put that on every few months.
But we will. It's inevitable. So,
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
so second.
Adjourned. Now that we're.
We need to turn off the
Got you
TV.
at home with your